Okay, so I draw the attention to the public board meeting of Northumbria Healthcare Foundation Trust here at Hexham today. You're all very welcome. Anyone joining us online, I hope you find this an interesting meeting and gives you some insight into what the Trust gets up to in service to our communities and patients. So if we can start with apologies for absence, Melissa.
Yeah, we have apologies from Bijou for the absence and Stephen Kelly.
And any declarations of interest? No. Good. Okay, so we've got, as enclosure 1, we've got the minutes from the previous meeting dated the 26th of May. So those of us who are here can take those as a true record. Any adjustments or comments on those minutes that are going to cover later in the meeting? Well, okay, and the action log I think is complete. A couple of comments from me. As chair of the trust, so I stand a little way back, so I'll probably see things more like the public than the executive side maybe, but we're very busy as I see it, and I'm being told regularly the numbers and experiences are a bit like winter rather than midsummer, which is an incredible statement here at the end of July. There is huge pressure on us all in the trust. And very much I think what you see in the media is what we're undergoing in the trust. The difference is amazing performance from our staff and leadership. We're actually managing to keep to fairly high standards, although not, as Jim will explain, not great standards that we have in normal times. I think the whole situation is exacerbated by staff isolation through COVID infection. And that's limiting our ability to deliver the best services every day. We'll be more about that. And from where I sit, Jim might comment later, but I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So the pressure is going to continue on the trust and our colleagues around the patch. Having said that, the whole focus of this table and our colleagues right around the trust is to do our very best for the patients. And that will not change as hard as it is. So I think with that said, we move on to the first item on the agenda, which is the CEO's report. Jim?
Yeah. So we've got the usual scorecard that shows a strong amber. As Alan said, relatively strong performance compared to the rest of the NHS, and good progress on a number of areas. We're still very pressured and still not rocking where we need to be yet. I think, well, I know as we sit here today, it feels like full winter extremis and urgent care. So it's been a very, very difficult week across the country and within the region, especially from an ambulance perspective. And you can see some of that in our pressures and ambulance handover. So a huge amount of focus going into that, as there is on the whole range of metrics, but especially youth cancer care, for example, where again we're still not quite where we want to be. Our elective performance and ED performance is still best in the country, but huge amounts of pressure there, stopping us get back to normal standards. The last few weeks have really been characterised by significant increase in COVID absence again, so the last 4 weeks or so. Had another really significant uptick there, which is really where pressure rests in terms of the staff, as well as the increased volumes coming on the door. Our core absence level, actually the underlying absence level, is within range of normal levels, about 0.25% above 1920. Would be run over a longer time period, so it was fairly normal actually, so which again I think is testament to our staff. This isn't going to sort itself out quickly, so I think we just need to not give up, not lose sight of what's really important in our longer term ambition, but recognise that the notion that we wake up one day and COVID's over and everything goes back to normal is just not going to happen. It's far too complicated for that. And we've got a period ahead of us which we continue to be very tough, I think. So with that in mind, just got to stay really focused on staff and patient. I think the agenda recognises that. I think the extent of their walkabout's fantastic to really get out and see what the experience is really like in the organisation. It's a really justifiable focus, especially given the current pressures. So, in summary, strong performance relative to others, not quite where we want to be. We need to be realistic on expectations without giving up, and continue to just really ruthlessly focus on patients and staff throughout.
Good. Thank you, Jim. So, any comments or questions from around the table? Okay. Nelson, Maren, good.
Yeah, I just think, as Jim said, it has been very difficult the last week. Our staff are doing an amazing job, and we'll just take it absolutely virtually on an hour-to-hour basis at the minute. The teams are all working behind the scenes very hard.
I think you need hour to hour from my understanding.
Yeah, we've just been on a call just now. Next one's 1 o'clock. So not quite an hour, but it's like that.
Okay. I just, I mean, from the board's point of view, commend Jim and the team for what they are doing, what they're achieving, and we're still looking forward to make sure that we're doing the right things to create a sustainable future safely. It's still there. Okay. So that's really good. Real challenge, but that's for today. Right, if we can move on to item 2.1 on the agenda, which is the patient and staff stories. Patrick Price is going to present this, Patrick.
Yeah, I think in the first instance I'm just going to talk about the recent staff survey results. We've done an interim report on that. You've seen the papers for the staff and patient experience information, the 2 stories that we shared there, one of which is about really good communication. I think it's about supporting families who can help patients to improve and to kind of survive. A lot of that was around kind of listening to what the family had to say and really responding very clearly to the needs of that young person who was very complex, but also about supporting the family to support that young person as well by making sure that they were looked after and they were cared for as well, which is really good experience. In terms of the patient experience work that we've been doing, the reassuring thing is there hasn't been a dip in experience of patients. It's still very positive. We still score very highly along all of the measures that we look at for patient experience, which is very reassuring given that there has been a lot of pressure on staff over the past 2 years, in fact, and we've measured this kind of regularly. Even during COVID, we did do measures around patient experience. We didn't stop doing that, and a lot of trust did stop. But really what we've had is a really consistent picture around patient care and patient experience, which is reassuring, I think, for the board. So whatever the experience of the staff is, it's not translating in any dip in any kind of patient experience. I just wanted people to have that reassurance. And of course the staff story was very much about kind of how staff are supporting each other to manage sometimes difficult, complex patients on wards, and it was very much from the perspective of somebody who's coming into that and a relatively new member of staff, feeling that they had the right information that helped them to manage the patient and to keep the patient safe and keep all of the other patients safe too, as well as the staff. So if anybody's got any questions about that, that's, I'm more than happy to answer them. But I think, sorry, yeah, here we go. I wanted to talk a little bit.
Do you want to just pause a bit on the staff story, because I think that it's a lot of us who are there don't get near the wards in times like this, and I thought it was stark, the violence and the procedures people need to go through to keep the place safe.
Yeah.
Jeremy?
So I found, in fact, both of the stories very interesting, because I think as somebody who's nearing the end of their medical career, these are patients who are becoming much more common that we look after. And I think in general that is a very good thing, is that there are people who clearly would have been perhaps managed within a police or a criminal environment, and coming with various psychological and problems that now are brought largely into the Northumbria, and they can be very challenging. We do have a 24-hour liaison service which is embedded with CNTWR, Local Mental Health Trust, But when I talk about their ambitions for that service and the signs that he speaks, it's really clear that it's an area of growth and need. It will be a challenge to us because both in terms of training the staff, giving them the support they need in a physical environment that you need to do that. And with the patient story as well, patients are noticeably becoming more complicated, I think, due to the success of earlier interventions and getting a good start in life and doing all of those public health things. But it does mean that the work that we're now undertaking day to day on a ward will look very, very different to what it might have looked like in an acute medical admissions unit 20 years ago. And we'll just need to work in partnership with organisations and people who understand either the complex conditions or the specific needs of the patients much more. It's a very different environment. That makes it both interesting, rewarding and challenging for the staff, particularly I think when it does involve threat to the staff's personal life.
I must say, as I read this, and just an insight, but we left wondering how how our staff are in both incidents. I mean, one year which had DNA, and then the other one which was particularly violent, threatening the staff, and how we pick that up and sort of settle staff down after all of that. Right?
Yeah. So I think from these two stories, things that I picked out were, first of all, about the staff looking after the patient, but actually the whole family, and giving brown bread when it was asked for is particularly important, because obviously the dad or the foster dad is diabetic. I think that's really, really good patient and extended family care. The other bit for me on the staffing thing, you're quite right regarding this is very difficult for the staff, but you can see at the beginning of that and at the end, the huddle and the debrief. And they're two of the most important things. Jeremy goes on about this all the time. If we can have those done very quickly, so we sometimes have a hot debrief, then a cold debrief, but we can do it straight away. It gives the staff confidence that we're all in it together. And if there's something we need to do very quickly, we can do it. And then think at the end of the day or the end of that week, let's reflect again and see what further we can do.
So not carrying the anxiety through the whole day, doing offload some.
And the staff are always offered, occupational health, they're great. Anything to do with staff and patient experience, they're always on hand. So we've got a lot of things that we can offer staff if they need it. Some choose to, some don't. Okay, and I guess through our reporting system, matrons and yourself are aware of these sort of things. Absolutely, in particular about this particular family, because we're all involved in it.
Okay, thank you for that.
And just for reassurance, we do pick up that kind of information through our staff survey as well, so we do get kind of clear reports about that. We know where to target any interventions. And the staff experience team have put together a new kind of training and development program for teams who are going through trauma, which is kind of the trauma-tuned peer support kind of program, and that's proved to be successful. So we introduced that after COVID, but we're carrying it on throughout the next couple of years.
Can I just ask a point, Marion, about the comment that's made about the uniforms and identifying the staff? Because I know we do have the boards around, don't we? But I know there's a lot of talk about people working in scrubs when it's warm and then
and that's
how we actually do
have
address
to look
that.
at, because obviously, and we're not all keen on lanyards in terms of infection control things or badges that they're, pins and things. But we are looking at a way, and again with the factory, we'll be looking to see, is there something that we could have. In my day, you had like, an edging, so like the matrons. So we're looking at that, and Elaine Henderson is looking at all the scrubs, because Jim and I have just been down speaking to the canteen staff, and they've been saying, could they wear scrubs because it's so hot? And we're saying, you absolutely can, but we just need to make sure you get the right colour so that people can identify with you. So it's a good point. And I think the scrubs are much easier to wear and much cooler. regardless of if it's this heat or just a general summer?
It is confusing though. Mary and I spoke at the ACP event yesterday, and I was remarking on for about 20 years of 3 uniforms on a ward, and you can tell everybody now it's God knows how many. It's very hard to work out who's doing what. So it's a valid point from the patient's perspective.
And I think even as you've all seen, like the hats and here triple we've got our names on. You could get something like that, like behind, like the footballers, not necessarily a number, I mean, but just so that they can differentiate.
Sponsor as well, maybe. Sorry? It is just much more complicated now, though, because we've got that blended workforce and all of those new blends that we're creating. They've all got trainee blends on them, so it is very confusing. So everyone introduces themselves, which I think is absolutely correct. That's the way best to do it. No, I agree.
Okay. I'm really pleased to hear that, because I thought it was just me that was confused.
And we really are trying as well, Anne, to try and get the names right, because everybody wants to have a different name, and really a lot of them are, say, like nurse practitioners or ACPs or whatever they are, but we need to try and keep that golden thread running through so that we don't get thousands and thousands of different jobs.
Right. Management challenge. Okay.
Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the interim report for staff experience. We're in the middle of doing our staff experience survey again that we do internally. This is health and wellbeing survey that we're running this time, but we're not reporting back on the health and wellbeing elements. We wanted to look at some of the core elements early doors. So we ran this on the 12th of July, and at that point we had 1,992 staff. We now got over 2,500 staff who have responded to us. So we're kind of on track with the last survey that we did in terms of absolute numbers, and it gives us really useful information. But as usual, when you start getting information in, it gives you an indication that you might need to look at things in a little bit more detail. So what we looked at was the core staff experience metrics of sustainable engagement, exhaustion and burnout, and the NHSE engagement questions, which we run through every survey. The other thing that we did is, in our last national survey that we did, there was some concerns around flexible working, or at least it was one of our lowest scores, even though it was a high score. So we wanted to include some questions around that, and our Family Ties Network, which is about parents working for the Trust, wanted us to ask some questions about childcare options, because they felt like that was something that would be useful for us to look at. So in terms of the summary, and this seems to be a continuing pattern, even though we've had more kind of responses since then, there has been a statistical decline in the sustainable engagement and the burnout and exhaustion scores overall since April 2022. But there is no significant business unit or subset kind of variation across the overall score. There is in some of the specific questions, but not in the overall one. There's one measure that's improved since we asked these questions in April, and that is around I often feel difficult emotions at work. No change overall in the 9 NHSE engagement measures since April, but some decline in individual questions, particularly around kind of staff involvement in decision making and advocacy, which was around kind of, this is a place I would recommend as a place to work. So when we look longer term at some of the last times that we did the wellbeing surveys, there has been a statistical decline in overall scores around engagement and burnout. So, it's obviously been a pattern here of a reduction. So it was fairly static for the first 2 times that we did that, but then it kind of started to decline a bit. No statistically significant change in average score since April or July, and sustainable engagement or since July 2021 for emotional exhaustion and burnout. But again, one of the things we wanted to do is to do a little bit more kind of granular digging behind this to find out what some of those reasons might be and why that decline's been in place. So we'd expect a lot of that will be about kind of contextual stuff that everybody's experiencing at the minute. People are tired, they're exhausted. I think at the end of 2.5 years of kind of COVID, and we're still dealing with sickness and absence, that's having an impact on staff too. So in terms of the sustainable engagement scores trust-wide, you can see that there's been a drop in 5 of those 6 measures. there. Like I said, the only one that's improved is I have a good understanding of trust, vision and strategy. The biggest drop has been around having the tools and equipment I need to do the job to the best of my ability. Now, we've had conversations about this before, that that's not necessarily about equipment, it's not necessarily about kind of things like PPE and what have you. It could be as much around there aren't enough staff, or there might be staff absences, there might be kind of other issues that are going on there that are preventing people being able to do the job to the best of their ability. And again, that's where we need to be asking more questions and getting some specific feedback about whether that applies to certain business units or departments or types of work. Again, drops are around people having the energy they need to get through the day, around believing in Northumbria's goals and objectives, which is unusual because they're everywhere, I think, around the trust. And certainly more worryingly, I suppose, those two last ones, I'm proud to work for Northumbria and I'm willing to go beyond what's required to help the trust succeed. So overall sustainable scores are down. In terms of emotional exhaustion, trust-wide, like I said, the only one we have an improvement in significant is I often feel difficult emotions at work. Overall, there's been a drop there in emotional exhaustion and burnout scores. Again, significant around feeling connected to others and the person I want to be at work, and I'm still happy I chose this career and job. Again, these are the NHS England employee engagement scores. So you can see that even though it's slightly down from April, it's not significantly down overall around the employee engagement based on the NHS kind of questions. When we looked at this over time, we wanted to see whether there'd been a drop. So we run the well-being survey, not every time, but we ran the last one in September 20 and one before that in September 19. There has been a significant drop in scores on that one. They're not necessarily, just to reassure people, when we've looked at NHS England kind of scores as they are now, we're still above average, still well above average. We used to be at the top, I think, so that's maybe, it's an indicator for us that we need to do something, I think. And again, the same around emotional exhaustion, burnout overall. Now, we only started measuring that in September. As a result of COVID, we wanted to get a sense of how staff were feeling. But again, there's been a drop there. The question around flexible working and childcare, again, we asked our staff kind of whether they had flexible working opportunities and whether they were satisfied with that. So you had 45% of the respondents saying that they did have flexible working arrangements, and 52% of them were happy with the arrangements, and reassuringly 70% of them said they felt they could talk openly to their manager about that. The most popular flexible working arrangements are around flexible start and finish times, which will help, of course, with childcare and issues like that, and home and remote working. And when we asked line managers, what is it that's a barrier to you kind of introducing flexible working, because that's quite often where the decision making sits. Understandably, it's about kind of making those decisions might have an impact on the rest of the team, and it might be affected by staffing levels. So if you've got high levels of sickness absence, or you've got some people off longer term, then it's much more difficult, I think, to put flexible working arrangements in place. So we also asked people about the childcare arrangements that got in place, and this came from our Family Ties Staff Network, who wanted to get a little bit more information about this. So you can see that 40% of the respondents currently use or plan to use have recently used childcare facilities or arrangements, and of them, 59% were for children aged between 0 and 4. 74 had kind of separate arrangements from the trust arrangements, they had nursery provision outside of this, or private kind of nursery care. 32 were kind of family members and using kind of other arrangements, but 32 were our own childcare facilities. 65% were currently happy with their access to childcare facilities. Above 48% of staff were saying that they wanted some more options, particularly around workplaces. And I know we've had some feedback from the network around maybe childcare facilities being more readily available at NSAC. So 51% of them felt like the childcare arrangements did have an impact on their ability to do their job. So again, it's just information that we need to dig behind, and kind of once we get the final results in, we'll have a much clearer picture, I think, of how people are faring. That was it.
Thanks, Patrick. lots of good information in there. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Firstly, a comment really, I think in terms of the consistently high return rate of the staff surveys, I think is remarkably good and sustained even during difficult times. And I think that says an awful lot about the values of the trust, because through Jim, the exec team and other leaders, people are listening to and acting on the results, and we see this particularly in detail through Workforce Committee, for example. And you know, I think it's right to say, Patrick, that the granular detail goes right down, you know, to kind of almost team level, whereby in live time people are responding to what the staff are saying, and I think that gives us great confidence and assurance of this really crucial source of information and intelligent insight on our workforce. And I kind of just emphasise that point. I watched Jim's staff vlog last night, and Jim was referencing very openly, very candidly, and very honestly these interim results in his vlog last night. And I think that gives staffs confidence, and we would expect, you know, scores to go up and down. It's not unsurprising. People's morale, motivation, stress, anxieties fluctuate. And I think it's that honesty that we see consistently coming through different forums that gives me personally, as chair of the Workforce Committee, great assurance that this is a really crucial area of business.
Yeah, thanks Bernie, and I think it feels a bit like the first, you know, in that March 20 moment when we decided whether we should do this and everyone would be telling us things that we found uncomfortable. We had a moment about, you know, we should actually still try and do this and see what's on people's minds and listen to things that are hard to hear. And it feels like that now. The last few weeks has just been awful. And we're also measuring a few different things here, so there are some slightly contradictory messages that can tie your knots a little bit when you're looking at the different bits of measurement. But I think having the ability to measure is a great thing. We've got a fantastic team able to do that. Response rate, as you've highlighted, shows a willingness from staff and a confidence in staff that they can say things and will act upon them. When you unpack the results, when you do this properly when it's finished, I look straight away at the places I'm worried about, where the pressure is, and actually a lot of them are very consistent and have held up. There's some other odd movements in other places, so I think getting the richness in the data to see what's actually going on, talking to people, doing some things, and then see if it moves us to do things. So we shouldn't wobble because we've had a wobble in the numbers. Now is the time to still stand firm on it, isn't it, and see it through and do what we can.
We'll see the full results in September.
We'll probably get them by the end of August, I think.
September.
So for September. Yeah. I think the other reassuring thing is we've got 10 staff network groups, and they contain some of the more vulnerable staff members that we've got. In the last survey that we ran, we had a really high proportion of BAME staff, LGBT staff, disabled staff with the autism spectrum, responding to the survey much higher than we do on the national kind of thing. And I think if we're hearing those voices, that's really reassuring that the people who are maybe feeling might be subject to some of the aggression from patients and family members that are prepared to tell us what they think. So that's a good sign that we're prepared to do that.
Important insight, I agree with that. And your less obvious areas as well, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's a good survey. Keep it going. We're learning a lot. Okay, anything else for Patrick then? Good report, thanks for standing in, Patrick. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, now, Jim in his introduction emphasised that you know, we've had non-executive directors doing water match, which we'll do in a moment. But just as we pass, one of the other things that really has been happening in the Trust over the summer is more face-to-face and more access to what really goes on in the Trust for all of us. And even just seeing each other in the flesh sort of thing makes such a difference. You get the body language, you get conversations, the side conversations. And this is just another plea from me. Anyone who's watching, you know, we need to try as hard as we can to get back to a normal life. It's the summer, it's fresh air, there's light nights. As far as we can, try and join in with normal life. We need to be prudent and safe, but let's try, because you could see it just last evening in the governor's meeting, A lot of governors there, outside with a cup of coffee, chapels there. It's just what we want in the trust, so we just need to keep that going. Anyway, part of it is the non-executive directors visit wards and places. So Alan, you visited Northumbria? Alan?
I did indeed, and this was an unplanned and unstructured visit. I met Marion at the door, said, what do you want to see? I said, whatever you like. So we actually spent an hour wandering around. Clearly everybody knows Marion, and that I don't think it coloured what they were saying to us. But we just knocked on doors, opened the doors in the basement, anywhere in the place. And we probably saw 15 or 20 people and just asked them how they were getting on, particularly with all the pressures and things. I guess before we start, the first impressions were everything did look well organised and under control, and the only, apart from the usual bits and pieces of NSEC which need putting right, the only thing which annoyed Marion, probably more than me, was the bits of sticky arrows left on the floors which hadn't been properly scraped off, and they may have been scraped off now. But otherwise it was a very calm environment. We talked to everybody that we saw, and to a person they were very happy. They had pressures, they realised that everybody was in a difficult situation. But there was none of them said this is intolerable. Some of them said, I wish I had this, I wish I had a better room. But they were all basically very happy. The birthing centre was one thing where there was something even more positive. In particular, you will probably have heard of something called BadgerNet, which is a new way of recording data in obstetrics. It's been a long time coming, but it had just arrived just before that, and had been particularly useful because they'd had a patient transfer, I think from Southampton, with all of the information on BadgerNet immediately available, and that was a fantastic advance. Overall I had the impression of a dedicated staff who were doing their best in spite of the pressures. And I enjoyed it, and I came away with the feeling that the Northumbria family, as we call it, really does exist, and they all felt that working for a successful organisation, and that they had their important part to play in that. So it's a thoroughly positive visit for me. Whether Marion wants to add anything?
No, I think you've covered everything, Alan, and I think that we did go and see a number of the managers, the matrons and things, because we went downstairs first, and I think they were very pleased to see Alan, because often we just go straight onto the wards or the departments, but we were downstairs anyway, so we just thought we would have a wander. As I say, it was unplanned, so nobody was expecting us, and I think they mentioned later on how nice it was to see some.
That's good. Good. Thanks, Alan. Phil?
Yes, so another Marion walkabout with Elliot this time, looked at the theatres and wards at Hexham, where we have there, of course. It was a really interesting walkabout. We discussed all sorts of things. I think my report was longer than normal because I wanted to get so much of it down, but it was a really good discussion. Theatres, pretty busy. We've actually probably got 3.5 theatres rather than 4, but we are looking through the refurb programme to expand that to 5, so that would be very welcome. The only thing I did note was the sort of lack of storage space, but again that should be addressed through the refurb programme as well, so it would be good to get that sorted. I had a long discussion about robotic surgery, and we've seen the news announcements around that recently as well. It's brilliant how that's come along from just doing the routine stuff to now more and more complex operations as well, so that's an excellent development. One thing I hadn't appreciated, and talking to the orthopaedic surgeon, was that so much now is done on a day case basis, so the 85% throughput on a day case basis is it was really impressive. And even then, for the ones that aren't, length of stay was averaging about 2 days, so it really has moved on significantly. That it causes another issue, which I'll come on in a moment, but obviously that's great from that point of view. Recovery Street is looking good, and I saw the cap there that we produce at the manufacturing board. It is great because they put it in big letters, and that's great from the patient's point of view, because they're not sort of looking to find your name on your badge somewhere, but they can see it straight away. So that's an excellent development. That on the wards, and in a sense, this is where we become victims of our success on surgery. The surgery ward was very quiet. Has an average occupancy of about 20%. Medicine wards, on the other hand, extremely busy. And we have on occasions flipped some of the beds in surgery, but it's a process that takes some time to do, and then unflippers and so forth. So I think there's a proposal to move more permanently some of the surgery beds to medicine, about half of them, which clearly makes sense as a long-term requirement. But overall, really interesting visit. Talked to lots of the staff. Busy, but having time to have a chat about things, and clearly very committed to the work that they're doing. And I just got a general overall feeling that it's a really well-run place, and it's a place people like to work. So thank you for the host.
Thanks, man. Moira, you've got a couple?
Yeah. So the first one that I did was to see the community midwives who are based for the North Tyneside area. At North Tyneside used to be the old maternity department. The scanning facility is still there. So I walked in, and as it happened, the maintenance weren't around. They were all committed elsewhere. So I just really sat and spoke to the community midwives before they went out on their visits. Which is always interesting, because first of all, I think they think, oh, I wonder what they're going to, what they want to know. So I just said generally if there's any issues. So they give me, one of them had worked the weekend, and this had been really busy over the weekend. So, you know, it's the scale of getting around as many different visits in a short time over the geographical area. There was a bit about expenses raised, but not a lot. I think they all have started to feel, particularly on the teams I spoke to, the increase in the birth rate has had an impact on their workload. And once we were aware of that, they would talk to me, you know, sometimes 18 visits going in over a weekend, because people don't stay in the trust very long after they've delivered, they're straight out, and they've obviously got to follow them up. I spoke to the midwife that deals with some of the mums who may require sort of specialist support in terms of either a safeguarding issue or medical care, and she was only one specialist midwife on that team, and was already on that Monday morning getting a list together. I need to go because there's somebody just being discharged, we need to follow that up. And that gives you a sense of what they're dealing with in the community. As you would expect, Bajonet was raised. That had been live about 3 weeks, and I thought they were very positive about it. Yes, it's another thing they've got to deal with. It's a new system, but overall I think they found it quite positive, and that they, like Alan's just recalled, they can now see the full record of patients who have moved into the area, mums who have just arrived or staying with relatives, so they do have a much more comprehensive picture of the whole patient and the baby. So it was, as I say, they were very frank. They didn't put any pushes, but I wouldn't expect them to. I thought the accommodation was pretty tight around there. They were all crammed in. There were a couple of offices. I did join they have a morning call at 9:30. So I joined that with all the other units joining in. On that morning, there wasn't any staffing pressures. So everybody could go out and do, I think on occasion, some of them would have been told either to go to another site, or they would be looking for help from, say, maybe it's the Hexham or the ANIC team.
Good.
Now the next one, Jeremy was on that visit with me, and we were there on a Monday lunchtime.
Yeah. What, 12 o'clock?
Yeah. So we, I think it's fair to say that we visited Ward 3 and 5. It was a different sort of visit. We obviously concentrate on the medical wards. Ward 5 is actually one of the newly refurbished wards, and that's where the Walton units are now relocated. They had literally only been back on the ward about 48 hours. And as you would expect with anything, when you've just moved in, it's a bit chaotic. So in fairness to them, it did feel like a lot of boxes, a lot of kit lying around.
I think chaos probably wouldn't be how I would have
Yeah, well, yeah.
I mean, I think, you know, there was some clutter in the offices. I thought the environment was lovely.
But it was very cluttered. We obviously spent a bit of time with the ward manager on that ward, and as much as he was trying to cover up to say, you know, well this is somebody's going to come up and fix this, somebody else is going to come up and fix that, you could tell that was going to be work in progress. We took the opportunity to speak to quite a few staff who were delighted with the new ward. Were certainly the patients and staff were looking forward to having much improved facilities, let's be honest. In terms of access to bathrooms. As I say, there's a rehab room, which again, I think once it's up and running, will be a real feature for that ward in terms of improving the patient experience and able to get them out of, if you like, out of the ward into a more sort of rehab environment. So I think that was quite positive. We then went on to Ward 3, which is the Annick ward, which again is a ward that's been probably since last September, Marion.
Yeah.
They've been down at Wansbeck whilst their ward was being refurbed, and I think there was a sense of, we thought we're here till Christmas, here we are, it's June and we still haven't got a date. Now I now know from Safety and Quality last week they do have a date to move back, so I think that will be quite a boost. Staff were obviously travelling from Annick, it was extra travel time, all of that. And there was a sense on that ward, there was a number of staff who had either just been temporarily put on that ward for that day. There was certainly staff absence, and there was quite a heavy workload on certain patient care. It was, you know, there was a sense of, there was certainly staff around, but there was a sense of, there was COVID on the ward, there was patients that had to be specialed. So Jeremy and I were on that ward for, I was going to say, a good half hour speaking to them, but they all, you felt their pressure. You felt that was a tough day. It was a tough shift. Jeremy, I don't know if you want to add anything on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was. It's, you know, Monday at 12 o'clock is the peak point at which on a Bayside ward you've identified all of the discharges. You know what you're getting in coming in, and you've got to, you know, finished all the bed baths and the ward rounds. But actually, there were a lot of staff on both of the wards. I was very impressed with the breadth of training that offered, and their apprentices absolutely everywhere. And both wards had fantastic examples of people who were either sat as nurse practitioners or senior nurses who've been through all of that process, and they were all definitely pulling together as a team. But I have to say, this is, you know, when you're busy, this is what it's like. So I think it was, you know, it was all safe and the jobs were getting done, but it was it can be hard work.
It did feel pressured, and you know, we walk away after half an hour, and I'm aware that they're now there for another 6 hours. And that would be a tough shift, to be fair, because it was, it felt difficult. I think it's fair to say they're all looking forward to the new recruitment, the overseas recruitment, which I think they'll get in the autumn. I think all of them feel that will be certainly something that they can work with, and you know, they welcome that. I don't think any of the staff said they weren't being supported in any way. I think it's just that's where they were on that day. I mean, a Monday is a good day to do a visit, is what I was going to say, because you know, you pick up stuff from the weekend. It's pressured on a Monday, isn't it? Because they've got all of the weekend churn going through.
So one of the things that did strike me, I'd recently done a visit at North Tyneside where we looked at the discharge lounge and the treatment medical interventions unit, and these are people who would have been day case patients on normal inpatient wards, and you just have that nice little turnover of patients who walk in. But, so one of the things I think that has gone on is the nature, as we become more efficient at what we do, and I think the nature of ward nursing has changed. And I think particularly at the base sites, it is people who have a significant amount of nursing needs, lots of medications, they'll need they have a lot of care needs, quite a bit of work. And so I do think it is worth us thinking in the round of what those environments are and how we, how for instance we enact those splits, bits of work that perhaps might have been a bit of a break in the day, and that actually they get set up as, and whether you can somehow jointly staff units such as that, so the nature of the work that the ward nurses are undertaking isn't always the same. So, but I do think that is something that we're going to need to look at. But I mean, it's certainly what I would normally expect to see at times when you're busy on our wards, and it's a lot of care being given to quite a number of people.
It's interesting that you make that sort of comment about what we do on our wards, and then Phil on the orthopaedic wards, and 20% utilisation. There's a real challenge going forward as to how we use our wards and how we use our nursing assets, isn't it?
I said this in the clinical strategy, Alan, the patient demographic that are coming in is getting older and older and more complicated, and as we get better at managing lots of other things at home, actually, we still have fundamentally people who need to be in hospital because they're a bit unwell and have really pretty significant nursing care, and will need to go to some sort of assisted placement, whether that's assisted at home or assisted in a care or a nursing home.
The point is we need to be ready for that world, can't we?
Well, it's here.
It's here.
Absolutely.
We're getting bigger.
Ward 3. And 5.
Yeah, both of them way so.
Yeah, and I thought the layout of Ward 5, which was a bit, do you know what I mean, where the bays were just a little bit, it is just a much better, with rehab there and physios.
Oh yeah,
It was much better.
yeah.
And that's what they'll get at ANIC, and I think everyone can see that. So I think it's all part of the plan, but it's not just those wards that are needed. It's the base site reconfiguration.
Okay, that's good. Bernie?
Yeah, I did 3 different visits. I
Okay, so
had a busy month. But first one was replicated to some degree Phil's visit to Hexham. So I went around with Elliot and Nicky Moon. But we visited theatres, and again, very it was unannounced but very much welcomed, and very engaging with the staff. They were busy, for sure, and there was an immediate frenetic feel about the place, but it wasn't at capacity. It was early morning, but it was clearly getting busier, I think, as you could sense as we were moving around. There was an immediate sense of good control, organisation. There had clearly been some challenges around staffing, particularly COVID related. That was clearly evidenced talking to the staff. And there was some recruitment challenges in that area, particularly, I think, theatre nurses, which led to a really interesting and quite thought-provoking discussion around recruitment and how do we attract people to those types of hard-to-fill jobs, but more NH jobs generally. We were, and the staff themselves there were really wanted to be much more innovative. We were talking about how Amazon, for example, advertised for their jobs, people on paddle boards and rock climbing and work-life balance, and then we put a 1950s job description out on the NHS website or something. So there was a bit of a, could we and should we be doing this much more innovatively, much more marketing type focused recruitment. So that was interesting. There was a great sense of enthusiasm around the forthcoming changes to theatres, so that was being well looked forward to. The recovery area was really interesting, and again a great sense of calm control. Again, pretty busy, but the panopticon design of that ward was really quite, you could tell straight away, this works really well, which I'll come on to in contrast with the stroke ward. But so that was really good. We went to Ward 3, the orthopaedic and day surgery. Again, busy and under control. Not quite at capacity, but you know, seemed to be a good ward design, good flow of patients moving through there, good sight of patients, which all good assurance in terms of patient sort of care and attention. That was really clear. There was some anxiety on that ward around forthcoming ward changes, would be fair to say, but it was well understood and being dealt with in terms of the staff engagement. But there was a bit of anxiety amongst those staff. Asked the staff on Ward 3, well, we had the magic wand, but what would you like? It was really quite endearing because they just come back and said, we just want our beds full of patients because that's what we're here to do. So full wards all of the time because that's what we want to do, just care for patients. I thought that was really, again, just reflects the trust value, so I thought it was great. When I looked at Ward 4, the stroke ward, immediately that was in stark contrast to the recovery area in terms of ward design. Long, thin, quite, well, I think they deliberately had the lights off or dimmed in certain areas, but it was a very different feel. Very warm. It was a warm day, but it was particularly warm on that ward, and the only form of ventilation was 2 windows at either extremity of the very long, thin ward. So that was clearly causing difficulties. But again, it was, the enthusiasm of the staff on that ward was palpable. It was a really good morale and motivation there. Short-term staff moves was a general theme for Hexham, if I'm honest. They understood, listen, you know, the pressures are what they are, and we have to move and we have to look after patients, but I think for people who like to work in Hexham, because of its geography, being moved, you know, I don't know, to Wansbeck or NSEC is a bit of a heavy lift. And if it's happening regularly, it can have an impact on staff morale. So overall, a really positive visit. The other thing on the stroke ward, there was, you know, some very evident falls observations happening. And again, the configuration of the ward with its design, you end up with people sat outside of rooms, which Mickey and Elliot and I discussed, and with the ward sister, but it kind of didn't feel right. And is that the most dignified way of caring for a patient? It didn't feel right, if I'm honest. And is it actually the best use of skilled nursing resource? We got into a discussion around them. Is there a volunteer opportunity there, or is there a different staff role, more of an engagement role? Is this, you know, and I know Marion's on this and it's been dealt with, but it did come back up into conversation. But overall, really good visit. You know, a really clear focus on elective recovery. So that was Hexham. A very different visit with Marion to NSEC. We went principally to have a look at home safe and the community aspect, but we popped into the Project Joy launch, which, you know, Moira will have great insight into the history of it, but clearly a project designed to raise and improve staff morale, health and well-being. And they were really buzzing, I think, the group, and they have made a massive effort, big launch, a lot of focus on staff health and well-being, clear improvements in morale and teamwork, good spirit. It hasn't clearly not always been that way, but good effort in moving on. We went and had a slightly different type of visit with Home Safe. It was more of a team meeting, because obviously the nature of their work. So we met the group, we were about, maybe, I can't remember what it was, maybe it felt like about a dozen or so people, but discharged nurses, team leaders, occupational therapists, technical instructors. So it was a really good mix, and they really were I think, quite enthused to have us there and to have our ears so we could listen to. But they were great. They were a great team. You know, and I think the opportunity for greater integration with the wards was clear, and they were moving office, which I think was going to be a big help. There were some big issues around parking, classic hygiene type factors, but Marion was on it and it's been sorted, and I think they're delighted with that response. There were some issues around facilitating the patient flow out of hospital, and pharmacy was a bit of a pinch point. I think it would be fair to say, Marion, and I think they had some great ideas how they could better work with, communicate with pharmacy, for example, wards as well, earlier in the discharge decision, so they could facilitate their bit of that chain to ensure patients got out of hospital as quick as they could. So that was a really, I think their big ask was for more occupational therapists, was their kind of big ask. I thought they were crucial, weren't they?
And training in the self-applicated academy, because obviously we're linked with the side at the moment in Cumbria, so thank you.
Yeah, and the final visit chair was...
Just before you go there, there's a helicopter just gone past. I understand the red arrows might be doing a flyover. I'm not sure if it's in a specific gym. But you might not hear that.
Okay. The final visit was again to NSEC with Alistair Blair. I was particularly keen to see the ambulance corridor, which I'll come back to, but we also took in the new procedures unit and cardiology whilst I was there. So ambulance corridor, my first impression was it's not a corridor. It might be technically a corridor, but it operates significantly differently. It was it had much more of a ward feel about it to me. It was pretty busy. There was an immediate frenetic feel, but I think that was off the back of they had an extremely busy morning. The nurse in charge who you were talking to, who was clearly had been frazzled, I think. You hadn't had any lunch, and she was coming towards the end of a tiring shift. She was very engaging, but that is clearly a highly, you know, as the layperson here, that is clearly a highly pressurised, challenging area. Advised that it was often run on very limited resource, which can be doubly challenging. So that was, I asked them the magic wand question and just get Nias to send us less ambulances, please. You know, it was just, they're at the maximum. So it was great to see that and get a good, but there was good staff morale, albeit I think the pressures do take its toll, for sure. The new procedures unit, we went up and had a look at that. It was, it was.
Yeah, they're a good way over. Just see them past the window.
They were meant to come on my summary. The new procedures unit, it was actually not open to patients on the day. It's in, I think it was in its very infancy of staged opening. Impressive, I have to say. Great design. Really, you know, it was actually locked, and we were peering through the door. A domestic came to our aid and showed us around. She was tremendously engaging. And the arrows on the floor came up. Honestly, this individual, she's on an individual mission to have them arrows removed and those marks. She's doing her own research on chemicals and all sorts to get them up. What a passion for what, you know. What was interesting, because she was so passionate about the cleanliness of that unit, it was her unit, that was it. But the beds had arrived, I think, in a poor state, to be honest, and she wasn't happy about it. And it was been a bit of a struggle to get them to her level of cleanliness. So we discussed that with some men. So that was good. Clearly that's going to have a big impact, that unit for sure. And then we had a little cardiology, again, it was surprising, it was busy. I don't know what that ward's been like in the recent heat, but it was pretty hot when we were there, before this more recent rise in temperature, and that was clearly difficult. Good morale, well staffed, no real staffing challenges as such. Possibility for improved ward cardiology communication on telemetry, for example. You know, and different people have different priorities at different times, and that patient observation, and people get frustrated when certain updates are not available because of different pressure points. But overall, really good feel about it. Again, really positive overall visit, Chairman.
Good. Thank you. I did one formal visit, which was with Jeremy around critical care. I really believe that place is an asset. I think it's got 19 beds. It looks like it's been designed for people who need critical care. And everything I saw, sort of people that field was calm. The nurses were attentive to the 2 patients in that side of the ward. Interestingly, there's a bit of assurance that 2 days before we discussed the replacement of V60 ventilators, there was one in use. The staff were absolutely up to speed with what the issues were, the need for replacement. And then we actually moved into a small cupboard, really, which was definitely cluttered. But one of the reasons it was cluttered was it was a training place for the new ventilators coming out. So there was assurance straight from fit into
through 19.
Yeah.
But importantly in that, the relationship generally, and Jeremy, and you get a real sense of the team, and I think a number of you said that. You know, even though your chair or certainly an executive director, you know, you can tell it's just day-to-day working. We work well together, and that's impressive. But in the room, there's 2 ventilators ready for critical care, a 3rd one for more wide use. People being trained, and the supplier is definitely afraid with our needs and what we needed to know to make these things work. So that was really good. And it was nice, clean, calm, lovely place to be if you're really sick. We then went into the respiratory unit, where I see that was different. I think just stepping into the ward, you knew there was pressure. You know, it was slightly flustered. They definitely did not want to be interfered with at that time. That was clear. So we just stayed in the central part, talked to them, on top of their jobs, understood the patients, the needs of the patients right around there. And I think that in itself, you know, there was more evidence there of clients than mine. Just extremely high focus on their tasks at home, and instinct said go in here. However, as we were coming out, we were stopped, Jeremy, by one of the senior nurse practitioners, are they? The PIN squad. The PIN people.
Oh, outreach.
Outreach. And they more or less dragged us in and told us their story, which was the 7 of them who operate, you know, from that centre trust-wide. If there's an alarm comes up, their job is to see that the alarm has been attended to. If not, they get the ground and do it themselves, I guess. But you know, lots of assurance in that. Very alert and hugely experienced. I mean, you can just tell anything is going to go wrong. The sort of people who
change this slide. I'm really struggling to get my head around the change in junior doctors to postgraduate doctors. Although I think it's a really good thing. It's a national steer. If you think back to the strike and the contract when it came in, people's perception is that junior doctors are 1 or 2 years within qualification. Some of them are 15 or 16 years post-qualification. They're not junior. They're just junior to consultants. In fact, some of them are senior to consultants in length of service. So I think that's a really good thing to try and start changing that perception of the public about what a doctor is and what a junior doctor is. So that's all happening. And just a quick, there's nothing new in rotas. I've reported the rota gaps. We've got some gaps in August, but it's not big gaps. The plans we already, the management systems we have in place seem to plug them reasonably well. Just on that, medicine is doing a big re-look at their rotas across the whole trust to try and look at the complexity of cross-cover, because that is where some of the, if there are disgruntlement coming, it's around cross-cover, getting to work and at short notice being told to go to a different ward or even a different site you're not familiar with does not go down well and is not good for patient care either, but it's necessary. So hopefully the look at that will lead to some improvement. And we've still got some relaxation of the rota rules as a COVID response. We haven't stopped that as yet, which I think is the right decision at the minute, because there are still doctors isolating, which is having an impact. And I think that's me.
Yeah, did you have a comment?
Well, I just feel that we're in a pretty good place in terms of how we're managing our educational workforce, and we've got a great team of people, both sort of on the pastoral side with Mike and with Andrea and the team. We get pretty good feedback when we get external visits, so there is good triangulation, I think, for some of this information, but I think it Mike indicates there's always more you can do, and I'm just grateful for your efforts trying to engage this group of peripatetic practitioners. But a lot of the issues that they're talking about have, they're similar, that being moved around and not being taken away from their training location. So they're quite similar to the ones we're experiencing on our
When the new contract came in, we were quite anxious about whether we could manage it. And I mean, the soft pastoral stuff that Mike's been doing, but generally, I mean, people have refocused, adjusted, it seems to be going.
It's that blended workforce that I talked about on the wards, so we've got an awful lot of people now doing clinical roles. When we first opened the base sites, it was only surgery that was working with a largely nurse practitioner workforce. So I remember on one of the medicine wards when we were at home, there was not a doctor to be found.
Yeah,
all of those roles were being filled by probably trained but highly qualified ex-members of the nursing profession who were working in our clinic.
Colleagues.
there's almost 100 doctors not on the training contract as well, so it's 300 plus who are on the junior doctors contract, and there's about 80 to 100
F3s.
who are F3. There's a lot of F3s now, so there's another group. They don't exception, they don't come to forum, but they're there and we're happy to talk.
You're watching.
Well, I wouldn't say
Locally employed,
we're here to help.
locally employed doctors.
Yeah.
So just adjacent to this, I mean, a lot in there is about education. I think we oversee the education of all junior doctors in the region, don't we? And one of my visits was looking at some of our education facilities that we're developing. And it's a really good story, the things we're doing from apprentices to advancement, left, right and centre. And at some point we need to bring that back up to public reporting, so to see what we're doing here at Northumbria from top of the profession to the last employees.
Just as an aside, we have had some conversations about quality, and we are very good with our quality panel focus on clinical teams, but I do wonder whether there are some ways that we can look at some of our teams that are not clinical and allow them to showcase and develop what they do. So I think perhaps education isn't the only area I'm thinking about, because they get quite a lot of external scrutiny, but I do think there's an awful lot that makes all of this run, but don't be honest.
It feels like a while since we talked about education here, Jeremy, so I wonder if we could schedule that for the autumn.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. Do a very grand job. I'd love to see though some of it done with medical education and the nursing education together.
It's the only way forward, I think.
Help
each other.
You see the students, and they're just out of school in one distance, wandering around regulating, and then people like Mike. This is important.
Not just out of school.
Well,
You were at school once though.
yeah.
Still reads Batman comics. So. Anyway, anything else from Mike? It's really good. Thank you, Mike, once again. Thanks for the review.
Nice to see you.
Right. Somewhere with Chris Dixon's Freedom to Speak Up Guardian. She's there.
Good morning. I'm online this morning.
Kirsty, morning.
Hi there. Hi, can you hear me all right?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. Just nice to see you all. Sorry I couldn't be with you in person. I'm a bit of a COVID symptoms, let's say. I wanted to start by thanking. I've had 120 staff coming to me since January, so in the last 2 quarters. So the numbers remain consistent, and I think it's recognition that we are still, capturing what their perceptions are, what their feelings are, what their experiences are. So I think it's really good that we'll have that culture. No kind of shock, surprises, no kind of areas really that are not known to the organisation. I've been involved in some recent conversations, safety and quality, workforce, and I think it's not everybody knows the state of play the NHS is in generally, where people are tired, exhausted, burnt out. And it's just how that's all been supported, and there's a lot of mechanisms and support in place for staff, so it's just another avenue of freedom to speak up. The data for me suggests that the improvement, we had a slight dip with staff coming to me that hadn't been speaking to managers first, and that's something that I've worked with some of the directors for years to look at and try and look at ways of improving. I've seen an increase in that data, so I think that's it's a positive to take from seeing that staff are starting to speak to their managers again and using those routes that exist. The kind of thing on my radar was that the category for other had significantly increased in the last 2 quarters, where the other categories it's people out with the organisation that are accessing freedom to speak up, and I can only kind of relate that to the fact that we were nationally recognised with the HSJ Awards last year. So we've had some members of the public, maybe about 15, 16 other trusts contacting me for advice and support and how are we doing things at Northumbria. So it's a positive in that we're doing something well, and we're getting that recognition that people are accessing me. I'm also, just conscious of how those cases are managed and signposted appropriately. So the open closed cases remain consistently about 25% remaining open at the end of each quarter. That's something I've personally tried to improve myself, just with how to speed up some of these processes to get these de-escalations or escalations in a timely manner. And it's always just on my radar that staff always give me positive feedback, and that most of them are 80-90% would speak up again. It's just I relate to that. What about the ones that don't want to speak up again? That's where I would want to put more focus on understanding a bit more about that. Really, the report speaks for itself. It's not, it's reassuring that we know what the issues are and that we've got processes in place to manage them. The kind of purpose today mainly would be around the promoting the training. The National Guardian Office have finally brought out the 3rd module, so there's a big kind of emphasis on all organisations completing the 3 modules. There's a speak up, listen up and follow up. That all staff are encouraged to do the speaking up module. I would also kind of advise that the listen up's as important, because I think I would say at Northumbria we've got the data to support that our staff do speak up. It's the what next, the what happens. Are we listening to staff, and then what's the follow up? There's also kind of new opportunities to look at how we are doing things within the organisation. There's an expectation of the NHS England and the National Office. They've updated the policy and the guidance for boards, so that the expectations would be January 2024 that we're able to say what what assurance we can give that we're on track, what changes did the organisation want to make, and looking at that assessment tool to see basically where we're at and where we're going is where we want to be. So any questions I'm happy to take.
There we go. Thank you, Kirsty. That's very thorough. Any questions or comments? Yeah.
Thanks, Kirsty, and I know that you were at Workforce yesterday. I think one of the main things that Kirsty has really been concentrating on is about that, making sure that the staff have been through our line manager. And that's really worked well, I think, Kirsty, because a lot of people before weren't, and the line manager wasn't aware. So I think that really has improved, and I certainly within my own areas, I think it has, but I know that in medicine it has as well. So well done for that, because that makes a big difference if we go through the right channels. And I know that you're very supportive of that.
Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, great point, Maureen. Kirsty, remind me, is the modules, or the e-learning modules, or classroom delivered?
Yeah.
The e-modules, yeah.
They're not linked through ESR quite yet. I don't know if it's something that our trust can, support that. You have to have an account with HAE to be able to access it, so it's slightly muddy just trying to get the access. But I think we could improve this conversation maybe with Dave Elliott and see if we can get something with the learning and development team to make that a bit easier accessible.
The concern would be if it's not accessible, it will not get used. So we kind of need to try and, with David's expertise, maybe facilitate that. That'd be great for you. Thanks, Kirsty.
Okay. So we're on a journey. So we've got the person, Kirsty, and we've got the process coming, and we've engaged our people. So it's really quite interesting. The signposting, I think, has been a difficult thing for us all to learn. Is when things should normally go to HR, a conversation with your managers in my head, or sometimes more sensitive, which you handle, I think, quite well, and that's appreciated. Quite difficult sometimes. So we'll just keep it going. Play our part. Okay. Anything else for Kirsty? No. Thanks so much, Kirsty.
Well,
thank you.
Thanks, Kirsty.
Thank you. Thanks.
Keep well.
Okay. We've got now CQC regulation we received from Ross.
Thank you, Chair. This is just our usual stakeholder engagement report around good governance. Pleased to say we're fully compliant on this, and I don't think there's anything specific to pull out this time. I know last time we talked a lot about the online kind of experience, other than really to welcome the increase in face-to-face, which feels a lot richer. We're getting a lot more out of. I think the governor's meeting last night was well attended and felt a lot better face-to-face again. The next phase really is the team planning what the best at, which is that rolling programme of engagement with sort of the harder to reach, and we look forward to that. So I think that other than that, the report probably speaks for itself.
Okay. Any comments? All right. Bruce?
Just, it was a question really, Ross, about the engagement, and it came up yesterday in the governor's conversations about how much we are targeting patients when they leave, about them being more engaged, about membership, about using the online community and those kind of things, because I see we've only got 279 online. It's still not big, is it, in terms of the numbers we have through the doors, and whether or not patients are actually even aware that there's something they can engage in when they've gone.
I think on the online one we'll have started an active programme of a bit more recruitment, and that'll probably take time to come through the numbers, but it is increasingly hard to do that. I think people often feel filling lots of things in or responding in lots of ways, so I think our strategy on that is that online, the sort of face-to-face rather, and trying to bolster that a bit, but definitely be looking at the recruitment and how we're doing that a bit more, make it a bit more visible, I think.
There's something in that about our resistance to fill forms in again now, and if I have to do anything to say the register, I'll just go somewhere else, just as you're having 20 minutes trying to fill something in. But the places that pop you a QR code or you scan something, it's just immediately available. It's completely different. So that's maybe something to think about to make it easier for people to just say, here, you don't have to faff around and put a load of details for 20 minutes.
I just think the patient, they're kind of current, aren't they? Yeah, the people we need to capture it.
And the volumes, we're going to see 700 people in ED alone today. It's only ever 200.
Even on the wall in ED, something to do while you're there, isn't it?
Is that an action for the really?
Yeah, just fix that. I'll draw you a QR code. I'm sure it'll work.
The other thing about the online community though, it is quite interesting because every now and again they pop up a question for comment, And you get quite a lot of comments back. It's a diverse community,
Yeah.
even though it's not large.
Yeah,
It's got
It's a small number, but we do get lots of helpful data. And what we try to do is start testing things at a much earlier stage, so we'll find out. So often what we think we know, but something that we think might not work, or what would be the best approach, and it's really helpful for people to get that rich feedback there early on.
Good. Excellent. Right, so move on, if that's all right. The next items under item 4, I think are all asterisks. Marion, could I just ask you on the international nurses, could you just give us a
Yes,
little
I have
update?
certainly. So we've got
Yeah.
60 coming in September. Elaine Henderson's leading on that with Jenny Loxon and Adele. And they've really gone to a lot of trouble to make sure that we get the right people in the right place. They're coming from all over, different countries. I know that there was a question last night on governors about are we recruiting these areas, where they're coming from, and I think Elaine sent in a very good update because we are governed by a lot of things with these countries themselves. So these are people that we aren't removing staff there, to help us. They have got an abundance of staff. They are coming, they're going to go to Alnwick and Wansbeck first, and we are doing a lot of work to make sure that they come as a group of people. We did this obviously 20 years ago with the Filipinos. They're still in their little groups yet, the ones that were retained, and we've retained a few. So we're targeting that. The Duchess has been very good at giving us a bit of the castle since we've been at Alnwick. And we've managed to get other areas. We are actually going to look for Berwick as well. That's been difficult to recruit to. So I know that Marcus and the team are helping Elaine with that. So they are getting their training in crew. I don't know why crew's chosen, but I think they've got everything in crew that they need. So the teams are there. If not this week, next week they start. And so they should be able to come to us up and running. But we'll be very, very keen on nurturing them and getting them involved with our Northumbria family.
Is 60 the limit?
No, we're going out for more, and Jim's very keen that next year, because I think we're probably a wee bit late this year, we're going to try and do it a bit earlier. It's worked for us this year because we've been able to do it with this company and they have everything really done for us. So we'll do it a bit earlier because we'll always have this gap just now before people start in September, and this is where annual leave, the COVID thing, all the rest of it has been really difficult for that. So we can try and preempt that for next year.
That's good. That's really
Yeah.
good. So I thought I'd pick that up because it is very good.
Yeah, and it's a good news story.
And your other two, both your reports have been through safety and quality.
Yeah. Nothing to escalate here.
And I'd like to mention you've got an excellent dashboard from so much easier to see. Okay, and the corporate safety and quality report, that goes through both FIP and safety and quality as well. So that's been seen in both committees. You're happy with that. And the financial report, again, that's been through FIP.
Yeah.
We're in good shape.
Yeah.
Paul?
Can I just add, Chairman, since the publication of the report, obviously the National Pay Award has been announced this week. There was a national call earlier in the week that's been confirmed that the cost of the pay award for providers to be fully funded.
Still in the process. Have you got anything to add to that?
No, that was a bit of a worrying process actually, but there is a bit of a hit when it's being held centrally largely, so I think it allows us to crack on and to do what we need to do. So it removes one of the risks. We've still got plenty of this. It removes one.
Got a lot to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so anything else on item 4? You all happy with those? Okay, so it's any other business? Any other business? Danger of finishing on time here. Review of the meeting. Got all you needed for this board meeting, able to contribute, discuss. Good presentations, I thought. Nice style. So I appreciate non-execs doing their overlaps, and I guess they will continue
Yeah.
There's no. I'm not sure if we've got anyone on from the public. No. Okay. So that, I'll declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much.
Yeah.